Are we ready?
Yeah.
Rishi better be ready. Which way do you, like, when you're sitting up here, do you do this? Anyway, if we have questions from the audience, feel free to raise your hands, because it's an Ask Me Anything, and you guys are free to ask questions of anybody up here. So if you have questions, just let them rip. But my first question's for Barney. Barney, you seem to be the face of what's going on DPReview. Is that because you are the best on camera?
It's partly actually a testament to how valuable everyone else on the team is. That when I am out of the office, working on a shoot or something like that, the work can continue in my absence. So my role as editor is not a content producing role so much anymore. It used to be. So actually, if anyone else is out of the office for 3 or 4 days or a week, it has a severe impact on the team's productivity. I can be out, and we can absorb that absence.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, partly it's something that I'm not uncomfortable doing. I learned that last year, but yeah, a lot of it actually is just so we reduce the impact on reviews.
All right. So Rishi, I've started to see some videos of you popping up, whether it's on Amazon or on DPReview. You seem to be the technical guru. Do you mind being that, or is that your thing?
Do I mind being that? I enjoy it. It's kind of my thing. My background is on the technical science side of things, but I've always loved photography, and so I feel really lucky to be able to combine the two at DPReview. So it's a ride. It's awesome. Like, we do a lot of fun stuff. In those videos that you just mentioned, we also get to put a lot of that technical knowledge to use and show how it can be used for photography, because there's a lot of technical stuff that might at first glance seem like, ooh, how is that related to the photography? But a lot of the time it can really help with the photo making process, and so that's something we concentrate on showing and talking about at DPReview.
Now, how's the feedback to your uber technical videos been? People love them? Do they hate them? Do they think everything in between?
I think we've received a lot of positive feedback. I think in the videos we maybe back off a little bit on the technicality compared to what you'll find in our in-depth reviews and articles, because you only have so much time in a video to get into all of that.
You have all the time in a video. You guys own servers. You are the cloud. So no matter how big your video is, you could do it.
There's a thing called attention span, right?
Yeah, that's the problem, is people don't watch it beyond about 15 to 20 minutes, so you've got to try and keep things fairly digestible.
How do you know? Analytics?
Rishi is usually more than happy to go beyond 15 or 20 minutes.
I got you.
Rishi talked to a man from NASA today.
Oh, yeah,
for an
Robert
hour.
Hertz. I mean, you put two geeks together, and then
keep it 20 minutes.
I saw Robert on a milk carton this morning, by the way.
Huh?
I saw Robert Hurt on a milk carton at one point after you started talking with him.
All right, let me see if we can find some questions. Any questions in the audience? If you people don't raise your hand, I will come out there and raise them for you. Yes? No, just yell it really loud so I can hear it.
So, with the new digital cameras that are coming out, you've got more and more features and more specs that people are noticing. So you have these more and more elaborate reviews that you have to do with these cameras. Is that harder to try to preempt all this stuff?
So I'll reiterate for the people at home. As technology keeps changing and there's a lot more information and details and specifications in cameras, is it harder and harder to do reviews? Barney.
It is. One of the challenges we have is actually trying to do justice to some of the features that are coming now, and they're coming out so quickly. So, we can just say, oh, it has a really good AF system. But with a camera like the Sony A7R Mark II, just to pick something out of the air, or the NX1, we can say that and it's true, but really, unless we explain exactly why, we're not actually adding any value to the internet. But we can't do that at the expense of doing everything else we need to do. So yes, it does add a lot of overhead. And one of the things that Rishi's tasked with doing at DPReview is creating new tests for these new features so that we can keep up. But it's also quite important that we manage to streamline our workflow in a way that we don't lose momentum on anything else. So part of that actually involves doing less of the kind of reviewing that maybe people used to see in the past, where we have 6 pages explaining what the buttons do. These days, we're much more likely to spend a lot of time on things like AF and increasingly things like video as well. So I'll hand that over to Rishi as well.
Yeah, I mean, you covered everything, the major points, which is that you're absolutely right. But I think we can actually still cover all these new features by keeping our focus use case based, and that's something we've been trying to do a lot recently, which is, if you are a landscape photographer, this is why dynamic range matters, and this is why RAW matters. I know someone on here actually shoots RAW, right? So
Sometimes.
sometimes,
I
yeah.
heard
Can I throw something to Allison here?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Let me just
No. Okay, Rishi, go ahead.
Is this you crushing me? This really hurts. It's just cutting me off like that. No. It's just that making sure that we relate. There are a lot of new features in cameras, and we can talk about all of them, or you can kind of isolate the ones that really matter. Like when we talk about AF, something we're looking into now is subject tracking, this sort of intelligent ability for a camera to know what you want to focus on and just track it and keep focus on it. So we're trying to approach this from if you're a sports photographer, a candid portraiture photographer, a landscape photographer, what are the new features that are going to allow you to take your pictures and video better and then address the features that way?
And I want to jump in and mention something else that's making camera testing really challenging now. A few years ago when a camera came out, there's a pretty good chance that was the camera you were going to have for a couple of years. You could digest it, you could write a review about it, and the rate of change we're seeing on cameras now from a number of manufacturers with firmware updates is really significant. And a great example is, I'm looking at the Samsung sign right here, so I'll pick on the Samsung NX1. We actually had a review of the Samsung NX1 ready to roll out, and about 2 days before we rolled it out, Samsung announced a firmware update. We loaded it onto the camera. It was a different camera. It didn't even feel like the same camera. And we practically had to go back and rewrite the whole review. So it's not just the volume of things, it's the rate of change is making the process a lot more challenging.
All right. So, Allison, why don't you tell everybody what your job is at DPReview?
My job at DPReview is to kind of manage the homepage. So I have a little bit of visibility into what's going on all kind of corners of the site, and I get to present it to the rest of you. And it's pretty cool. I get to, another part of what we're trying to do, is aside from these field test videos and our usual reviews and picking apart features of cameras, is to kind of showcase great photography too, what you actually get out of your gear. So that's another aspect of what I've been able to do.
Let me ask you this. What's one feature that you want to bring to the front page that the bosses have said no to?
No, I don't get told no a lot.
I think cat picture of the day did get nixed.
Yeah, that got shot down.
Picture of the day?
The
Cat picture of the day.
Oh,
rotating
cat picture of the day. Well,
picture.
I'm all for the archive. I
Yeah.
love the archive.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys hit it or anything, but I still go back to your site and just look in go all the way back. I believe Simon said 98
Yeah,
to see.
it goes back.
It's fun.
Yeah,
It's
it
fun
is
to see.
fun. We
And
were
our site search works really well now as well. So.
yeah. We were doing a little bit of research for this camera timeline over at our DPR booth, and just some of the things that we said about these cameras in their time was the first camera that had live view. Our founder called it a solution looking for a problem. Kind of turned out a little differently, but it's
It was
great.
true when he said it.
It was, yeah. I mean, and there's an argument that, it's just fun to go back,
Sure.
and read.
So Dale,
funny.
what Rishi?
Every
Wait,
time
hold
there's
that thought.
every time there's a technological advance, it's a solution looking for a problem, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're saying it about light field now, and said it about autofocus back in the
Said
day.
it about the iPhone as well. Look how that turned out.
Anybody else out here that wants to ask anything while you can do it? I'll keep asking things. I'm going to keep asking things. So Dale, tell us what is your day-to-day role?
So I'm one of the site editors, and I have a bit of a specialty in the area of video and filmmaking, and I think that's part of the fun reason. Part of the reason I'm on the team is I can bring some perspective on motion picture filmmaking, and one of the things we're trying to do is bring a lot more information about how to use cameras for video. So as you know, a lot
You
of
think
cameras,
video is important or something?
Yes.
You mean presenting
it seems
in
to be
video?
going somewhere because the cat video of the day thing it didn't work out, or the cat picture. But we're hoping cat video of the day might
Oh,
make it
yeah.
past the censors.
Cat videos work.
But yeah, I think it's fair to say that every camera really does video now. And one of the things we need to do is figure out how to do the kind of in-depth testing on video that we do on stills photography, become the gold standard for that, so that there is a reference that people can look at when trying to compare one camera to another in terms of video capabilities.
That's not the easiest thing to do.
And it
It's
turns out it's
subjective.
harder than film. You've done a lot of video, Jared. You know, video in many ways is harder than film. There's this perception that it's just still photography with a dimension of time added. But there's a lot of other things. You don't have JPEG. You have different types of compression and codecs, and you have sound. And there's so many more factors that go into it. And Arishi and I have had a lot of discussions about how to properly test video on cameras. And it's hard to come up with a standard for doing it.
Well, do you find that doing your uber technical reviews may overstep the need, like, maybe overstepping what you need to be doing?
No, it's entirely possible, and that's a really good question because as someone that's used a lot of different video cameras, one of the things I've experienced is sometimes the ultimate technical quality is less important than how the camera works as a camera and how it works in your hands. And to a large degree, that's part of the equation. There's two different types of tests that we do. There's subjective tests where we test how does it work for a photographer, how does it handle, and then there's the very objective data-driven tests that we're historically very good at as well. And finding the right balance for video, I think it's a different spot than it is for still photography.
Sure. So what is the focus as DPReview goes into their I don't know how many years it's been. How many years you've been around?
Well, 98 through 2015.
So 17 years?
17
Yeah.
years.
So you guys have been around a long time. You've been through a lot of iterations. But what is the future? What does the future hold for DPReview?
Well, I mean, in terms of the coverage, we've touched on this a little bit already. We have to be, and I think we are getting a lot better at doing experiential testing, not just listing out pages after pages after pages of menus, because it's very time consuming. So we should be going out in the field more, working with photographers more, hiring more photographers, something historically actually we weren't that good at, and doing more reviews, doing them quicker, but crucially making them more useful. And also, I think we're going to see a lot of people, and we are increasingly seeing this, people treating cameras as not just a stills camera, not just a video camera, using both functions. And so we have to test both functions, and we have to do it in a very convincing way. One of the things that Dale and I talk a lot about, and this is probably going to happen, I would hope, next year, is we'll actually start doing tests of dedicated video cameras on DPReview, or at the very least, test the dedicated video features of cameras in a much more consistent way, because it's becoming more important to our audience.
Right.
I'd like to add to that, and one thing I really think a future of DPReview should be is really a one-stop shop for all that information that you might need as a photographer or videographer, because, and I'm interested to hear your opinion on this too, Fro, which is just that as a photographer, you know, I may want to buy a new 35mm prime, and I have this system, and now I have all these options, but there are very few sites, if any, where I can just go and be told and just look at the right conclusions and tests to know which prime is the best for bokeh, best for sharpness, best for autofocus with this body, and just get a recommendation on the best thing. And that's just one example. Like, but lenses, bodies, all these sorts of things. Like, we should be a curated one-stop shop that has all the best information in the world, vetted and curated, that is absolutely accurate, and it also has a nice software tool to help interact with customers, so it's not like pages and pages of text to read.
Well, some of it is, some of what you said to me sounds over technical, because there is no saying that this lens, well, theoretically you can say that this is sharper than this and this is nicer bokeh and all that stuff, but for me it comes down to practicality and actually using it.
It has to be tied to real world use. It has to be tied to real world use, and that's why if you look at our, you know, we took a hiatus on lens reviews for a while. Lens reviews are actually extremely difficult to do properly. But now we've sort of picked it up again a little bit recently. Rishi's done some great work on it. And you'll see if you look at the content, a lot of it is photographs of things out in the world. And it's backed up by graphs. But actually most of it, really the core of it, is actually just very, very consistently, meticulously done side by sides of real world subjects.
Sure.
So it's like, it's actually for sharpness, instead of using graphs and numbers, just showing a real world image. I mean, even though I'm a scientist, I actually want to see the real world image effect. So we both want the same thing. And there is, I like to say, there's a ground truth. Like, there is a best lens in terms of autofocus, or a best lens for this type of use case for this job. It's our job to figure that out.
And I think to go beyond that a little bit, that we have a lot of focus on technical tests, on comparing one thing to another and determining, you know, what is the best. And I think the reality is we have to acknowledge that every camera, every lens is different. They're designed for different purposes, for different audiences, and there are certain objective things we can do, like resolution tests on a camera. where we can figure out there is a very objective, measurable, reproducible difference that we can see that will tell us good info about a camera. But there's also the experiential part that I think Barney mentioned. And every camera is going to handle differently. And all of us as photographers, we all come from different backgrounds. We use cameras differently. And I know it's frustrating sometimes. People will read one review and it'll give a slightly different perspective on usage than another review. And I think that's a reflection that usability is very much a personal thing. And our own background does bias the way we write about that sometimes.
And also the other thing there is one thing we know to our cost, and guys like Roger over at Lens Rentals and the other booth over there know, is that sample variation is a big deal too. And actually sample variation is something that means that there is no such thing as a measurement graph from a lens beyond the theoretical computational. So, that's actually something, sample variation is something that it's much more sensible, and actually in many ways I think easier to figure out in real world use than it is in a studio.
I agree with that. So walk through the process of, you must get a ton of requests to review things. How do you decide what you're going to review and what you're not going to review?
I'll take that one out of a sense of charity for everyone else on the panel. It is very, very difficult. We have an ever-changing list of priorities because the problem is our reviews take a little bit of time. Often we get quite advanced notice of new cameras coming out, new lenses coming out. Sometimes we don't. And both of those situations can cause issues, because if we get notice of a camera coming out in a month, but it's a camera that we know we have to do a ton of work on, we kind of have to take some resources off the team for part of that month. But we can't tell the audience that that's what we're doing, because we have to work on something that they don't know about yet for another 3 or 4 weeks.
It's hard to do.
It is.
Because you're taking resources from, you're not putting something public facing.
Exactly.
But it's like, we're doing something, but we can't tell you what we're doing.
People want to know why we're not publishing
Right.
about the camera that's out today, and we can't tell them
You can't
this.
tell them.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is, if you find out on Friday that someone's releasing something huge on Monday,
we have to work the weekend. This is a 24-hour job.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are all corporate working. You're 9 to 5.
But then what that means is, okay, so the big review you're going to put out that day, you can't anymore, because if you did, no one's going to see it because of this big news announcement. Then you've got to push that 3 or 4 days or a week. So now you've got manufacturers and readers asking, where's that review you said you were going to do? And the reason is someone else did something in the meantime. So we actually have never really had a nailed down editorial calendar because it's impossible. So we have to say, what are our readers talking about? What are we most interested in? What are our readers interested in? We have statistics. We know what content does well on the site. And then we just do the best we can, pretty much.
So how do you determine a successful review versus one that hasn't been as successful?
Sorry to take this one again. Traffic, just metrics. Metrics would be number of page views, but actually that's less important to us than number of visitors to the piece of content, regardless of page count. Engagement is a big part of that. The number of times the product is mentioned in our forums, in the comments, it's all sort of aggregated together.
Now, do you find yourself worrying too much about analytical BS than opposed to actually just going out and doing stuff?
It's usually pretty common sense. I mean, we know what's going to work and what's not going to work. It's very rare that we get surprised by a piece of content that like bombs. We know pretty much at this point in our careers, we know if we're spending our time on something that's just not worth the bother.
Right. Allison, what else? What else? Do you shoot?
I do. I'm very much in a learning phase, and I'm surrounded by extremely experienced and awesome photographers and videographers. I'm really spoiled. I can ask anybody a question about,
and you could ask Rishi a question, and you could get a 12-hour answer.
24 millimeter
You'd be lucky to get a 12-hour answer.
Yeah, I know. I've gone down that hole.
Didn't you start shooting film recently?
I did, and I'm going backwards or forwards or however you want to. Making fun of me. So I feel like that's kind of part of the learning process. I just try to shoot with, what comes in the door and learn it and have fun with it.
So talk about the gear. You get the gear. Everybody cares about gear for whatever reason. Instead of actually going out and shooting and using the gear, what happens to the gear that you get? Does it go back to the company? What goes on with all of that?
So we usually we have a stock and a very organized system for getting equipment and then using it and then returning it. So basically, we during the period that we're reviewing it, we'll often have at least one copy. Sometimes it helps to have more than one, so we can have multiple photographers.
Especially with
getting
lenses, actually, as well.
Especially because we have different photographers on the team who lend different experiences. It's great to send that camera or lens out with more than one photographer to get more of a perspective. And we do go. I mean, we understand the importance of going out and shooting with it because there's just such a plethora of information that comes from actually using it in different use cases. I recently was shooting with the A7R II a lot for candid portraiture and stuff, but then I took a recent honeymoon trip to Iceland and used it for 6 days straight in that scenario, and there are all these other things that I learned. This is obvious. You learn about it by being dropped in that scenario and trying to work with that camera in the cold, fumbling with gloves on your hands. So we put it through as many of these testing scenarios and real-world scenarios as we can, and then we usually have to send them back. Not always, but usually.
We never get to keep them. I mean, sometimes cameras come in and we have a very limited time with them. Sometimes we're lucky enough to be able to keep things for an extended period. We have, on very rare occasions, had to buy gear, but that's pretty unusual. It's almost just loaned and returned.
It really helps to keep them around sometimes for side-by-sides and shootouts, so we do that.
Right. I'm trying to think of which way to put some of these questions.
Well, you have 1 minute and 39 seconds left.
Oh, we're up to the yellow light now?
Think quickly.
Very quickly. Well, have you enjoyed this PIX event? What have you learned from this? What are you taking away from it?
Sorry, you go ahead.
Well, I guess I have a fairly close perspective to this because I've done a lot of the planning for it. I think the thing that surprised me most is even though I knew we had some amazing speakers and presenters that were coming to this event, I don't think I realized how good they were until we got here, we saw them in action, and we've gotten feedback from our audience. And I am just blown away by how inspiring and awesome some of these people are. I mean, it's beyond my dreams. It really is.
To go with that, and I was kind of backstage for a while while the speakers were coming in and out, and it is kind of humbling to see these people in person and realize they are real people and they are real photographers, like still working on things. The way just the way they talk to each other, like, oh, I'm working on this, and I really wish I had time to do this. And everybody has these struggles as photographers. It's just cool.
So the last question, it's a rapid fire for each one of you. Rishi, we'll start with you. Just first camera that you owned?
First camera I owned was a Canon 35mm film camera that my dad gave me on a family trip. We used to always take the summer vacations, and it's really what got me into photography.
Mine was a Pentax MX.
Wow.
What was it? It was a Kodak Retina 2 3C2. No, Kodak Retina 2 rangefinder camera.
Because Dale is 94 years old.
Yes, yeah. No, it was actually a hand-me-down. It was the first camera I really had that I could walk around and no one was asking for it back at the end of the day. It was an old rangefinder camera with a fold-out Schneider lens, but it was an amazing thing and I learned a lot with it.
A Canon 60D that I
Wow.
bought. Yeah, that's on the other side of the timeline.
And just quickly, I'd like to, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the first camera that I purchased was a Canon EOS Rebel Elan.
Yeah, that was my first camera.
Yeah. Microphone, Rishi.
That was film, right? Back in
That
the
was
day.
film, yes.
I think it
I
was the
grew
same.
up in the film era.
Yeah, I think that was my first camera.
As did we.
Look at that, we have something in common. What
Yes,
do
we
you know?
do. Did you have
We
something else?
found commonality between you and Rishi somehow. I don't know how that happened.
I just really quickly wanted to give a shout out to Dale. He touched on this earlier on. One of the reasons why Dale hasn't been doing any reviewing over the past 3 or 4 months is he's been working almost full time on organizing PIX. So one of a team, but Dale did incredible work over the last few months. So publicly, thank you very, very much indeed.
All right, guys. So that wraps up this AMA. Thank you guys for all of your answers. And stay tuned for more.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was fun.
Thanks, Jared.
Thanks.
You're welcome.